Hi, this is Rabbi Gigi. Thank you for joining me on this series on the Sefer Yetzira. These sessions are recorded from live Zoom sessions which you can join via the link on the website maayanchotam.com. You can find it on the community program page. The live sessions begin with 15 minutes of silent meditation which are not recorded. To get the most out of these videos, I recommend pausing the video for a few minutes to settle your mind before watching the rest of the video. You don't have to do it for 15 minutes, even 5 minutes will help. Make sure you're comfortable in your seat, close your eyes, bring your awareness to your breath, to your posture, to the space, the sounds, and the silence around you. And if your mind wanders into thinking, and if your emotions are aroused, return to the place. Return to where you are, to your seat. Hope you enjoy the video. What we're doing is training the mind to find the stillness behind it. So we're watching the running of our thoughts, of our movement towards productivity and creativity, doing something. And we're watching the return, how there is an energy that moves upwards back to the stillness behind all. Simultaneously there is a movement down to create and a movement up, back to to not create, to not do, which is like Shabbat on the weekdays. So this kind of meditation on Maaseh Merkavah is an aspect of Shabbat, or Shabbat is an aspect of that. Shev, Shabbat, Shuv Lamakom, Yeshev Badad, sitting alone, returning to the space, is Shabbat, resting and returning, sitting. Both Shabbat and the weekdays are meditation, but one is an active, outward meditation, and the other is an inward, quieting type of meditation. Okay. So I find that my mind is now pretty quiet from that. So we can stay in this place and just carry on discussing, talking from this place. And I want to share with you some insights which came today actually, around this idea of running and returning, because this is the central theme which we'll keep running back to, returning to, running and returning to. And I said it before, and I'll say it again, that the Gra points out that the gematria, the numerical value of Ratzu V'Shov, is Torah. That's the gematria of Ratzu V'Shov. So it tells you that the whole of the Torah is included in this phrase of Ratzu V'Shov. I found out also this week, I did the gematria of the pasuk I mentioned, Yeshev Badad V'Dom, Ki Natal Alav, so sit alone and be silent, because Hashem has placed this upon us. The gematria of that pasuk, the whole pasuk, is HaTorah. If you include the kolel of HaTorah, you'll see that the gematria of that pasuk is 617, which is the gematria of HaTorah, if you include the kolel, the word itself. So even that word is HaTorah. HaTorah, and Torah means receiving. Kabbalat Torah, Kabbalah is receiving, sitting in this place of receptivity. But also, like we see in Ratzu V'Shov, Torah is also moving, is Ratzu V'Shov, so it includes all those things as well. So I saw something really beautiful that was a point of hashgacha for me today, that I was speaking to somebody, a friend of mine, and he asked me, I offered to look something up for him, and I ended up finding something for myself, and that was in the commentary of Saadia Gaon on the Parsha in Torah, and I find, in fact, I'm going to see if I can find it here and share it with you, and we can look at it together. So here it is. So this is Rav Saadia Gaon translated into Hebrew. It's commentary on Parsha. So this is a commentary on Bereshit, on the first chapter of Bereshit, and third pasuk, right at the beginning. So he says here, Vayomer Elokim, and God says, this is what it says in the Torah. So Rav Saadia comments very concisely. He says the meaning of Vayomer Elokim is Ratzah Elokim. God desired. Right? Now if you're looking very carefully, you'll realize that Ratzah is the same as Ritzah, as running. So we see here how Vayomer Elokim, this process of speaking, is the same as running to speak. Rat picha ledaber. So we see and these are the ma'amarot as well. So we see how Vayomer, which is the ma'amarot, the diberot, which is the same idea, ma'amar, amira, dibur, speech, and different types of speech. Aspects of the way the Rav brings it here, aspects of ritza, aspects of running, but also we see that it's aspects of ratzon, which we saw previously, where ratzon is above, is olam Adam Kadmon, is above Atzilot, above where the Sefirot manifest. We saw how in Mishnah 7 how it talks about Devaro Bahim Ratzav Veshov, his word in them is Ratzav Veshov. Ulamama is Sufayir Dofo, to his Ma'amar, the Sefirot race afterwards. Whose Ma'amar? It says his Ma'amar, whose Ma'amar? Gra says this is referring to Adam Kadmon, and so therefore we linked it to Ratzon, which is Keter, which is Adam Kadmon. So we see that there is this aspect of that Ratzon, that Ritza, actually begins above Malch, above Chochmah, above Atzilot. It begins within Keter. So in some ways, Ratzu is actually above Veshov. It's above the Blima. And it's interesting. So we see. So what I realize is that, like just like we saw in the Klalot Elan of Ramchal, where Atzilut and Chochmah corresponds to, and Blima, silence, corresponds to the soul, the Or Makif part of the soul, the encompassing light, which corresponds to the soul called Chaya, which is the fourth level of the soul. And how the Ramchal there, he says that Chaya is called Or Choser. It is a returning light. It enters into the body, then it leaves the body. So both above the three levels of the soul we have, which are called Or Pnimi, which reside within the body. There is Or Makif, which is outside of the body. There are two layers of that. One of them is Or Choser, which is Chaya, enters the body and then leaves. And the other one is Or Yashar, which is Yechida, which is the aspect of Adam Kadmon, and Keter, and Ratzon as well. So actually what we find is Ratzon, is that Ratzon Veshov actually correspond to the Or Yashar and Or Choser. So the Or Yashar is the aspect of creativity, light coming directly from God, which is then this will to cultivate, will to create, the running. So actually running is not a bad thing. Running is the creative process. But in order for the whole thing to function, it has to be running and returning. And that is the returning light, or Choser. So I found that for me this was just a beautiful thing that came to me. I don't know why I didn't realize it beforehand. That Ratzu is an aspect of Ratzon. It's so clear. I didn't notice it until I saw this thing. So actually, what we have is two teachings here I got today. One of them is that Ratzu is Ratzon. So therefore, Ratzu, running, comes from above, before Atzilut, before silence, or Shtika. But also that Vayomer, which is the expression of the Sefirot. So we saw that, I mentioned this last week, that you have the Sefirot Blima, which is the Sefirot within Atzilut, unto themselves, which are silent and ineffable. It is only when they separate, like we saw in this third Mishnah, where there is 5 opposite 5, that there is a tongue, a circumcision of the tongue in between, that there is a separation, and speech can therefore come through. So speech is really the Sefirot and a manifestation of expression, which is Bri'ah, Yetzira, Asiya. So speech is the Olama Yetzira. The speech manifests there. Olama Bri'ah is thought. So they're both kind of are aspects of speech as well. So thoughts are constructed of language as well. So we see that Vayomer is the Ma'amarot and the Diberot are the Sefirot manifested through language after they have been separated. That's why we see the Diberot on 2 tablets, 5 opposite 5. Again, there is after the separation that's taken place. We possibly see the same thing with the Mamrod, even though there's no clear distinction between 5 opposite 5 over there. But this is from what we've seen Rav Sadiq on here, that Vayomer Elohim means Ratza Elohim, that God, that there is this running there. For me, this is such a clear teaching here that the intuition is right, that it's moving towards the right direction. That Vayomer therefore does correspond to that, and we see it coming out like that. So that's what I wanted to share with you, the insight from today. But let's now take a closer look and a deeper look at mishnah number 4. I'll share a screen with you. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Okay, if not, then we'll carry on. So we see mishnah number 4. In the English here, 10 Sefirot of nothingness, or 10 Sefirot of blima, 10 and not 9, 10 and not 11. Understand with wisdom, be wise with understanding, examine with them, and probe from them, establish every word by its nature, and return the creator to its base. So this is, again, the Sefer is a hard book to really kind of teach. But there's some, and I want to be cautious about how we proceed with it. And again, like I said last week, this whole first section is in my view, Ma'aseh Merkavah, which is why it is always talking about 10 Sefirot. So even though it says 10 Sefirot, and it starts listing them out, right? And here it does the same thing as well. But again, there's always a singular master, like over here. Singular covenant, another singular master. This whole section is about unity here. So I want to avoid separating them out, but that's what the Sefer does. It separates them out. And in this particular mishnah, this mishnah in particular does this. And so, but I want to try to refrain from doing it too much, because we'll see what it's referring to. So let's just unpack it and see what's going on in this particular mishnah. I highlighted it over here independently. So SS Rot Blima, again, this is the standard way Spirit Yetzira begins this first section. 10 Sefirot Blima, Ese B'lo Tesha, Ese B'lo 11, Haven B'chokhma, B'chakem B'bina. Again, like I did beforehand last week, for this section, I've done the same thing here. We've isolated them into different sections here. I put these big black marks because I feel like there is 2 real separate sections here. The first bit here, I want to talk about second, because I feel like the second part here is actually explaining what is happening in the first one. So the first one says 10 and not 9, 10 and not 11, understand with wisdom and be wise with understanding. So if you're reading this, or if you're familiar with Kabbalah, you'll know that wisdom and understanding, even though the Sefer itself doesn't refer to the Sefirot by these names, we know that does refer to the Sefirot in other places also. Chokhmah and Bina will be the second and third of the Sefirot, right? So it's hard not to realize that here, and it's hard again to get our heads around. But again, if we're talking about unity, then what is this talking about? If the whole Sefirot, this whole section is about unity, if it's Esser Sefirot, again, like we saw, why is it? And then again, this first bit of it talks about 10 and not 9. So why are we separating them out into Chokhmah and Bina? And also, what does it mean 10 Sefirot and not 9 Sefirot? Why would it be 9 Sefirot? And why would it be 11 Sefirot? So this first section, again, what we're going to have to do is separate the Sefirot out, even though we don't want to. Separate them out into what would 9 be and what would 10 be, right? So why would you say 9 and not 10? So that's why we look at Chokhmah and Bina. Chokhmah and Bina can separate out. So I will kind of explain it, but I want to move on to the next section before doing that. So Bachon behem, Chakom behem, v'ha'amed davar aborio, v'asher yotzar v'chon. even though we said the Sefirot shouldn't be separated, or this section of the Sefirot should be separated, they are unities, and what we're doing here is separating it, the Chochmah and Bina, and with Eser V'Lo Tesha, the 9 and the 11. We're separating that, we're distinguishing different Sefirot. Why are we doing that? We're doing that because of what's in the orange here. The Sefer Yetzira says, even though they are inseparable, well, we can use them as they, let's say, manifest in the lower universes, as they manifest separately. You can use the methodology or the meaning of the Sefirot independently to understand how the world works, and even to understand how the Sefirot work. So Bachon Bahem means examine with them. Bachon Bahem means if you want to know the world, look at the world through the prism of the Sefirot. So if you want to understand what the world is like, then look at it. What would it be like through Chochmah? What would the world look like if you compare it to everything we know about Chochmah, to everything we know about Bina, to everything we know about Chesed and Gevurah and Tiferet? What does it look like in reflection? What does the universe look like in reflection to that? Which is what part of the whole bunch of the Kabbalah is doing. We look at this aspect of reality and we see what sphere is being manifested here. Or what does it look like from that perspective? So even though this seems like we're separating the Sefirot, and in some ways we are, but we're doing it with a kind of, we want to do it consciously because we want to try to get a sense of what attribute is being manifested here, what idea and principle is being manifested here, and therefore how we can come to better understand ourselves, the world around us, and how we can come to better serve God in the process of that. So that's what the Sefer Yetzira is doing. It says Bachon Bahem, and it's the same principle. The Chakor Mehem is that Bachon Bahem means to use them in the sense of reflecting or comparing them to what we're seeing around us. So we look at, my computer and say, well, what sphere would my computer? If you're going to look at the laptop, or look at computer from the perspective of a sphere, which one would it be? What is the operations of the computer and how does it compare to Sefirot? So again, it could be, that's the computer works the binary code, and that's like that differentiation. That's about real specific annotations of or definitions of what this is and what that is, and so that seems to be like Bina, right? So a computer is something which does the aspects of Bina, which is all about isolating things, compartmentalizing things, categorizing things, naming things in a very particular way. So there's an aspect of Bina. So therefore, you'd say the computer is part of the Bina, or working functioning through that, right? Therefore, and that comparison is also the idea of Bachon Bahem. This whole principle of Bachon Bahem is the same idea. Is this idea of comparing one thing to the other. So Bina itself is this aspect of Bachon Bahem is an aspect of Bina, actually comparing this to that. Separating that, what differentiates this from that. Chakor Mehem is another way. Actually, it means Chakor Mehem means what does the world look like from those places, as opposed to what does the world look like when I compare it to these things. It's almost like an objective way of looking at the world, objectively comparing it to one thing to another. Bachon Chakor Mehem means when you are in that place of, when you're in Bina consciousness, when you're in Chochmah consciousness, what does the world look like? When you're looking at the world from a place of Chesed, from kindness, when you're looking at the world from a place of Gevurah, how does it change? So you can so when you look objectively at the world and say, well, this part of the world, is that an aspect of Chesed or Gevurah? Is that are we saying that's kindness or rigor? And we can do that objectively, but we can also look at the world from those places. If we exist from a place of Chesed, if we are acting kindly, and now we're looking at the world through that place, then the world will look different, or it will look like Chesed. And when we're in Gevurah, the world will look like Gevurah. So the Gemara, so the Sefer is telling us this is how we can use the Sefirot to come to a greater understanding of the world around us. And then going back, that's what it's actually doing. Looking at the spiritual practice of coming to a vision of the Sefirot, there are two modes we can do this in. One is Chokhmah and one is Bina. Right, so Chokhmah, and what it tells us is Haven Chokhmah. Make sure when you're doing Chokhmah, do it with Bina. When you're doing Bina, do it with Chokhmah. Right? I want to make sure I'm making sense of this. If you have any questions, please raise it. Please kind of like ask questions about it. Okay, so I'm just going to without the feedback. I don't know whether I'm making sense or not, but I'll carry on and see what we can take it forwards. So we've been talking about again and again. The mystery schools break down into two types of activity: Ratzon v'Shov, running and returning. That is also the same as Maaseh Bereshit, Maaseh Merkava. Maaseh Merkava is this idea of returning. It is the Shov aspect of it. God is Ezekiel's looking up at the vision of God, how the world comes into being, and he's returning to that place. He is experiencing the elements of silence there. And Maaseh Bereshit, which is the creative process, which is the running aspect of it. So these are the two types of spiritual activity. And if you look at them carefully, you'll see that Chokhmah, which is what we've already been saying, Chokhmah is an aspect of Atzilut, and so it's an aspect of the Kol Chokhmah, the power of what? The power of nothingness. So Chokhmah is actually an aspect of Maaseh Merkava, it's an aspect of Shuv, of returning, of the Or Chozer, the light which returns back to its source, which turns back to its source. So therefore we can look at when the Sefer says examine from them, compare them to each other, examine with them and explore from them. That's exactly what it's doing. It's saying Chokhmah is this aspect of silence. Bina is an aspect of, therefore, is an aspect of division. Bina, like the mother of creation. Bina is an aspect of mother. It is a producing, it is an aspect of producing, of making in the world, differentiation in the world, manifest through differentiation. And so Bina is an aspect of thought, Bina is Bri'ah, Bina is Ma'amarot, Bina is that process of creation. So therefore what we have is Chokhmah and Bina is the same as Maaseh Bereshit and Maaseh Merkava. Right? Later on in the next mishnah in the Sefer Yetzira, I'll just turn to it so we can see. 10 Sefirot of nothingness, their measure is 10 which has no end. Then it talks about depth of beginning, a depth of end, a depth of good, evil, above, below, east, west, north, and south. So the Gra points out that the depth of, so these are obviously 10 here, and it's a definition of space and time and consciousness, which we'll look at next week with Hashem. But the Gra points out that a depth of beginning and a depth of end refers to Chokhmah and Bina. Chokhmah is called Reshit Chokhmah. There is a Tehillah which says Reshit Chokhmah, the beginning, and it's understood the beginning of wisdom, but actually it's understood in some places the beginning is wisdom. Wisdom is the beginning. And the Gra says Chariot refers to Bina. So we see here, going back to this mishnah, Chokhmah and Bina really, not only is it Maaseh Merkava, Maaseh Bereshit, it is beginning and end. So Chokhmah is the beginning, which is Maaseh Merkava, which is returning. It is that process of we're longing to return to the source, going back to the beginning of where things are. So Chokhmah is always beginning, it's always beforehand, returning to what it was. To return the ket, like we see this all over the place, to return. Our purpose is to return the crown to its to what it was originally. So we're looking back and thinking how we wish we would have that same experience, and that is we're looking for wisdom. So always looking backwards is looking for wisdom. Like that's the whole idea of respecting the elders, because the elders represent chokhmah, wisdom, because they've been around for longer, so they have more wisdom to share with us. So looking back is an aspect of wisdom. Looking forwards is understanding. So in the future there is greater understanding, but there is less wisdom. In the past there is greater wisdom and less understanding. That's kind of how it is. What we see here is that the Sefer is telling us no. It's not just about chokhmah and bina. It's not about just recognizing that there is Maaseh Merkavah, Maaseh Bereshit. It says no, we have to bring them together. Right? So it's not just we recognize the Ratzu B'Shor. It's not just that there is running to speak, and whether that's good or bad in context, or running that we have to, or returning that we have to come back to silence and just not speak, like we saw in Rabbi Elazar. Of the silencing. We need to do both. That's what it tells us. It says that we're the next step, and this is why what this mishnah is telling us is that there is something else other than Maaseh Bereshit, Maaseh Merkavah. There is a third process, and that third process comes when we take running and returning and consciously bring them into each other. We find the boundaries between running and returning, between speaking, acting, going out to do something, and returning and being silent and just accepting things as it is. So it says when we do chokhmah, we should do it with bina. Haven bechokhmah. Oh, sorry, the other way around. When we do bina, we do it with chokhmah. Haven bechokhmah. When we do bina, when we're running, we should do it with wisdom. We should do it with being silent. Mechakem bevina. When we're doing silence, we should do it with running. We should do it with the speech, and we'll see how this manifests later on with the accepted Kabbalah, with Abulafia, how they use speech to find silence. Again, so what it's saying is that we find silence through speech. How the Kabbalists, they find silence through speech. At the same time, we find speech through silence. So we have this process of moving. What happens actually through this is we find a third way, and that third way is called in Chazal, the Gemara, in the Mishnah, as Sitrei Arayot, the mysteries of union, the mysteries of bringing one thing into relationship with another. So even though in the Gemara itself it doesn't talk about it as a mystery, as a mystery school, Abulafia and others see it as an aspect of a mystery, a school of mysticism, and that's why Sitrei Arayot. You see, when Chokhmah and Bina come into context, the Sitrei Arayot in the Gemara refers to forbidden unions, and it shouldn't be spoken about in more than before more than two people. We see there's a connection there, and in this idea of relationship. So here, in this context, is relationship between Bina and Chokhmah, which is the mother and the father, Bina and Chokhmah, and Ratzu V'Shor, the relationship between those two things. But we see from the Kabbalah that when Chokhmah and Bina come together, something else manifests. And that something else is Da'at. Da'at means knowledge. And if we've seen before, we saw at the beginning that Da'at, in the biblical sense, means carnal knowledge. It means intimacy. So when we do this Chokhmah and Bina, bring these two things together, bring speech into silence and bring silence into speech, we manifest this third thing, which is Da'at. It's an emergent principle. So Da'at is not so that then takes us to the next step. The one beforehand, look back. So there are 10 Sfirot, right? But when we do Chokhmah, Haven bechokhmah v'chakem b'vina, what's manifesting is Da'at, and Da'at is not one of the 10 Sfirot. It's an 11th one. Right, so this happens, and so we'll notice that something emerges, that there is an emergent property that comes out of this unification of the Sfirot. So we saw previously how actually Da'at is this Chokhmah in time, this Brit, which is this covenant, which is between the 5 and the 5, is the Brit, the tongue, which is that aspect of Da'at there. It brings about speech. So Da'at is this place where it can bring about silence and can bring about speech. It is kind of the creative process. But the Sefer says it is not one of the 10 Sefirot. It is an emergent property. It is something which looks like an 11th Sefirah, but it is not an 11th Sefirah. It is something which it's something which emerges out of this idea of Chokhmah and Bina. So it is almost like a door between these two things. So we have Chokhmah, which is silence, we have Bina, which is speaking and creativity and everything else like that. And in the middle of that is Da'at. It's a doorway which can choose between Chokhmah, between silence, and they can choose between Da'at. It's right there in the middle. But when these two things are in balance, what you have is Da'at. That you just have Da'at, which is really kind of a combination between the two. It is a speaking silence. And Ezekiel's vision is called Chashmal. Chash means silent and Mal means speaking. In modern Hebrew, it's referred to as electricity. That's how they use it. The word for electricity. It's like the Mareh HaBazak, this electricity that comes down. Same principle. And it emerges out of it, but it's not really there. It is an emergent property. So that's why the Sefer says when you do this joining between Chokhmah and Binah, it looks like there is 11, but actually there's 10. Right? But that, what it does do is reflect something else. Right? So that, it appears when we combine Chokhmah and Bina, it appears below Chokhmah and Bina as an emergent principle. Okay, another thing actually is that another way of understanding Da'at is going to what we saw, that Chokhmah is past and Bina is the future. So Da'at is that present. It is because the present doesn't really exist. It's always, we're either living in the past or the future. The present is this kind of emergent property which comes about when we try to define or try to find the point of meeting between the past and the future, where it emerges. And when it emerges, when we bring the past into the future and the future into the past, we find ourselves in the present moment. And that is, again, with the meditation, that is kind of what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to manifest that principle of Da'at, this present moment awareness, what is happening right here and right now. It's a really powerful idea, that. I mean, it's one of the, it's Eckhart Tolle's Power of Now is the most, I don't know if it still is, but it was, for quite a while, the most popular book on spirituality on Amazon, the one which was the bestseller of spirituality there. It's all about this idea of the present moment, the power of now. And the power of now is the combination, is having Chokhmah v'chakim b'Bina. When we bring these two principles together, we see the power of now. We see how the present just emerges like the appearance of lightning there. And why is it powerful? Because Da'at is a reflection of what is called Da'at Elyon. There is something higher than that, and that is the first principle, which is Keter. So this takes us to the first section here. Esev Lotesha. We explained 10 and not 11. 10 and not 9 is, why don't we speak about Keter? So Eser, the 9 that we're seeing here, that it could have been 9. Why could it be 9? Because we could think, might imagine that Keter is not there. Keter is not one of the Sefirot. Why? Because, well, there are a few reasons. One of them is like what we've been speaking about, because Keter in some ways is a combination of Chokhmah and Bina. It is a unification of Chokhmah and Bina. But we just said, when Chokhmah and Bina combine, there is Da'at, and Da'at is not really real. It's just a meeting point between Chokhmah and Bina. So you might come and say the same thing about Keter. Keter doesn't really exist either. It's just a combination of Chokhmah and Bina. But actually, that's not the case. Keter is unlike Da'at in that it's not that binding Chokhmah and Bina together you receive Keter. It is rather that within Keter is simultaneously Chokhmah and Bina. Chokhmah and Bina, Keter, is the union of opposites. It's the union of past and the present. It's the union. It's not that it contains the past and the present. It contains simultaneously the paradox of speech and silence at the same time. When you're speaking, there is silence. When you're silent, there is speech. It is the same thing. It is chashmal to the absolute. How can you have speech and silence at the same time? That is keter. So it's not that it's not an emergent property like that, which appears to exist. It is the source of both silence and speaking. So it's actually beyond those things. It's behind thought. So we said that Bina is thought and Chokhmah is, or Biriya is thought and Atzilut, which is the same idea. Biriya is Bina, Atzilut is Chokhmah. Bina is thought, Chokhmah is beyond thought, behind thought. Keter is behind thought, which means that it's not even silent. You can't even talk about it like that. It's beyond even silence, because it contains speaking as well, and therefore that's why we saw that Ratzon exists in Keter. Ratzon is running, is speaking then. So how does that make any sense? So Keter is above all of those things, but you can see it reflected in Da'at, which is the present moment, which is that's why Keter is called Da'at Elyon, higher knowing. So again, I'm not sure if you're picking up on this or receiving what this is all about. It's a very deep topic here. These three ideas, or this idea of Keter, Chokhmah, Bina, and Da'at as well, how the spiritual practice manifests.
I picked up bits.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd recommend looking at Rabbi. So I'll go back to it because it's always great. Rabbi Joey Rosenfeld, he has a series on Rabbi Morgenstern called Entering the Sea of Wisdom, and you'll see all these teachings, all these topics are there in Rabbi Morgenstern. And I'm bringing it down through the Sefer Yetzira, how the Sefer Yetzira explains it. But you look at it there, and you'll see how he manifests it. And he brings this idea, right? That we have two properties, two general principles of the world, the way the spirituality works. We have Chokhmah, which is all about oneness. There is no undifferentiation, and undifferentiation means you can't speak about it because the whole essence of speech is differentiating one thing from another thing. Whereas silence is that. So again, the other metaphor we have here is the Midrash says that the primordial Torah was written black fire upon white fire. Black fire is the letters, and white fire is the background behind it, the page behind it. So white fire is chokhmah, it is silence. The white paper has no sound to it. Whereas the black writing, which is defined, it has dimension and space. That is the defined. That is speaking. That is where the language manifests. So we see this idea in Chokhmah and Bina, how that is.
Is that why Hasidim wear black and white all the time? Does it have to do with that concept? I know the Torah is that way. I'm trying to get the basis for wearing black and white, which in the Kabbalistic world, black is not good.
Yeah. It's interesting. So somebody asked me that question recently, this week actually, and I need to look it up, like really where it comes from. I think I've seen there is I'm going to give you another promotion here. Daniel Matt's book essential Kabbalah talks about colors and the Sefirot. And if I remember, if I'm maybe going to pick it up. Because he tells you about, it says black and white, because obviously black and white are not colors. White is a color which includes all colors, and actually black is the same as white, it's just darker. Let me read this to you here. This is Daniel Matt's the Essential Kabbalah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right. This is page 47, and it is a quote from. A minute. Try to find what's referring to. It's up in Sefirot. Okay, let's see. Just want to give you the correct quote here. Okay. Okay, this whole section comes from the Ramak. Actually, it's an Or Ne'erav. Okay, very good. There's actually Or Ne'erav is there is an English translation of it. It's on a Safari as well. We're going to check this out. So this is from the Ramak's Or Ne'erav, talking about colors, and it says colors are ascribed to the various Sefirot according to their actions. Thus, white indicates compassion, red indicates judgment, and so on, as is well known. Right now, this is the important part. Regarding Keter, some say that it has no color, while others say that the whitest of whites is appropriate for it. Still others construe its color as black. These three colors correspond to its three aspects. First, by virtue of being with the emanator, it is black. Second, in and of itself, since it is not revealed to what is emanated, no color pertains to it. Third, in its aspect of emanating compassion through the other Sefirot, it partakes of the mystery of whiteness. Right? So, I think it's beautiful. I saw that ages ago. I remember that. It says, I don't know if you got that. The Keter is black and white and colorless. Those are its aspects of it, because the color manifests is how things work. So black fire on white fire, that's both Keter. And so if you look in the Gra, so the Gra, he talks about the Sefirot as being manifesting within Keter. So if you go back to the beginning of the thing here. So he says, with 32 wondrous paths of wisdom. So again, another reason why you might say 9 and not 10, why Keter is missing, is because the Sefer says 32 wondrous paths of wisdom, right? So it begins with wisdom. So therefore, Chokhmah is the beginning, and Chokhmah is Reshit, beginning. So what's Keter? So no, the Sefer says even though we begin with Chokhmah, it's Chokhmah, these 32 paths, the Sefirot exist within Atzilut and not above that, even though they do exist above that, but their primary location is in Atzilut, so therefore it's wisdom, it's Chokhmah. So Sefer says no, even though it starts with wisdom, even though Chokhmah is the beginning, there are 10. Keter is included as one of the 10. But the Gra points out that 32 wondrous paths, in Hebrew, Nitivot Playot. He says this idea of Playot is Pele, is wonder, right? This idea of wonder refers to Keter. So he says actually the Sefirot exists within Keter. They come from within Keter, and actually it's the wisdom within Keter. That's where the Sefirot manifests. So the first manifestation of the Sefirot is in Keter. Right? So that we can look at this whole thing of black and white. So black fire, white fire, and colorless fire are all aspects of Keter. Because ultimately, that is the beginning of all things. That is almost the entirety of all things. Keter is the entirety of the whole thing, and everything else is just an expression of it, a manifestation of it. It's like the idea of we say in Kabbalat Shabbat, Sof Ma'aseh Machshavat Chila. The end, the final action is the first thing you think about. When you come to do something, to create something in the universe, your intention is directed towards the final action. Like you're thinking about the finished product. You're not thinking about, before it's finished. You're thinking about it when it's painted and completed and varnished and everything like that. You're not thinking about it before it's painted, before it's carved. So therefore, Sof Ma'aseh, the final action is in Machshavat Chila, is in the first thought. And so therefore, Machshavat Chila is Keter, the first thing, your Ratzon, the will, the desire, everything, that principle of why am I doing something, it contains within it the spark of, or the end product. Which again, that's why it comes back and forth. That's why you're jumping around in the Sefer Yetzira. Because if you look here in this seventh mishnah, their end is embedded in their beginning, and the beginning and the end. This is the same principle. Sof ma'aseh b'machshavat tchila. Keter and the final product is in the thing right at the beginning. Right, so therefore, Keter is the essence of it all. Keter is where everything begins. Everything is there contained within it. So therefore, it has to be included because it is not that it emerges from it, but it contains the whole lot. It is the seed, the principle, the seed of everything that comes out from it. Okay, so I hope that explains this section of the Sefer Yetzira to a pretty good extent. Let's now finish it off with this red part. So once we got again, I could spend another hour on this last section, but let's try to just complete this thing in two ways. The first way we'll look at it is in the sense of what we've trying to achieve here. So so again, this is connected to the orange part. So we said the orange part is looking at the world around us through the principles of the Sefirot. So again, like we saw last week, the Sefirot, everything we see around us is the Sefirot. There is nothing outside of that. It's all aspects of it. So therefore, we can just if we understand the Sefirot, if we experience them and understand them, and have their vision, see them wherever they are, then we can come to an understanding where they are manifest in the world around us, because everything is an aspect of that, right? So that's why we can examine the world around us with it. We can bachon bahem, v'chakom bahem. We can do that activity, and once we're proficient in that activity, we can then v'ha'amed davar haboryo. We can stand a thing on its essence. Davar. In one way, it means the things around us. Look at the world around us, whatever it might be, and when we go through this process of understanding and not just knowing the Sefirot and bachon bahem v'chakom bahem, but also haven v'chokhmah v'chakim b'vina, and understanding Keter, seeing how these things and looking at within us, and being in this process, not just using it, but being in the whole thing. Then we can ha'amed davar haboryo. So from a meditation perspective, meditation can allow us to fully understand, contemplate what's in front of us by positioning us within this universe, within the world around us. When we meditate on an object, we can come to understand that object. And we can so actually ha'amed davar haboryo is the essence of meditation. We can contemplate God, and we can ha'amed davar haboryo. We can contemplate how God manifests in the universe. Look at ourselves, can understand ourselves. So meditation can help us come to a clearer understanding of it. Ha'amed davar haboryo, stand a thing, so established. So Rambam talks about it in Moreh Nevuchim. What is ha'amed? It's a metaphor. It means to establish. You're fixing a thing. You're giving it permanency. Ha'amed davar haboryo means you're establishing a thing upon its essence. You come to clarity of what it is in front of you. So it's like, I can ask a question, I go out to this metaphor often. What is a chair? Right? Okay. What do you mean, what is a chair? Everyone knows what a chair is. Okay, fine, but what is a chair? Like, if you wanted to define a chair to somebody who didn't know what a chair was, what would you do? How would you define it, right? So everyone knows what a chair is, but okay, let's clarify it. A chair is an object which is designed for us to sit on. Okay, so how big can a chair be? Right, so therefore it has a limitation of size. Can it be a small chair or a big chair? How when is a chair not a chair? If a chair doesn't have a back, is it still a chair? It's a stool at that point, right? And what if it just looks like a chair, but it's not a chair? What if it's something you can sit on, but it's not a chair? So it's a table. Is that a chair? No. What if it has a back? What if it's a table with a back? Is it a chair or is it not? Maybe it's depend on the designer. And when he made it, he had in mind that it's going to be a chair or not a chair, right? So even defining what something simple as a chair, what is it? It's not so easy to do that. But when we do this process, we can then clarify what is a thing. And davar is a thing, but also a word. Amen davar al moria is coming to an essence of what is this thing in front of us. Definition of that. I saw this metaphor of a chariot. What is a chariot? When is a chariot not a chariot? Are the wheels of the chariot? Is the axle a chariot? Is the chair a chariot? What if you were to take it apart? Would it still be a chariot? So this world exists because we define it. And it's the same principle. So again, this reflective. That Hashev Yoter al-Mechana is a reflection of Hamed Davar al-Boria. Again, we have two metaphors: standing and sitting. Hashev is sitting, returning, and sitting. Yoter al-Mechana, returning the creator, the former to his place, the creator to his base. Again, the same idea. When we understand what a thing is, we understand what the creator is doing. When we understand what a chair is, we can understand the mind of the creator, the person who made that chair. So this is why the Gra points out that davar is an aspect of malchut, which is the lowest aspect, the soft davar, the end of the thing. Yetzira is an aspect of Zeir Anpin, the six Sefirot of Zeir Anpin, Tiferet. So what he's saying is that what the Gra basically explains is that it's kind of a reflection of what we see in the green. Means you're returning Malchut to Tiferet, to Zeir Anpin, and Yotzer Hashev Yoter Mechana, you're returning your Yotzer to Mechana. What is Mechana? That is Malchut. Right? So what is interesting is that Tiferet, Zeir Anpin and Malchut is a reflection of Chochmah and Bina. So what we see here is Hamed Davar al-Boria returning Malchut to Tiferet and returning Tiferet to Malchut. Right? And so it's the same process. It's just on a lower level of it. So again, Yotzer, Tiferet is an aspect of Ma'amarot. We saw previously, Malchut is a Diberot. So again, we see this whole way that the universe is working like this. There's more to say on that. And I think it kind of should be left there for like a little bit of reflection, contemplation, rather than unpacking it further than that. Unless you have questions about it, we can try to do some more on that.
I was because of where I have been this evening, I've only got chat. It's the phrase. Got into bits. Been going in and out, but a couple of what I heard was sort of quite inspiring in places. And you can hear me, okay?
Yeah. I
I'm
can
now
hear you.
driving because I've got to get something. So I'm going on holiday tomorrow. So it's, anyway. One is actually it was very interesting about colours, and I've read the Ordinary Rav as well. It's interesting, what about colours, and this Sefer is this colour, that Sefer is that colour. It actually just put me in mind. It was very interesting because we're talking about the kind of the unknowable beyond the unknowable, let's say. It was quite interesting when I was looking through my book at the Color of Sapphire theme, that I found a lot of commentators sort of talking about the color of sapphire.
Mm.
And it was extraordinary because blue obviously is there, white is another. There are white sapphires out there. I looked it up on the net. But then you have people talking about red and green.
Oh yeah.
And it's just very interesting how it comes to the point of once you get beyond a certain point, you realize that color is really a matter of perception, and it ties into the point about you saying, well, black and white, what's the difference? Well, the nature of the thing, the color it will give off, is completely dependent on the light shone on it.
Yeah.
It's not inherent. And following on from that, you mentioned about the black fire on white fire, and and I think the very interesting thing about the way that metaphor is put is that obviously when you have an actual physical Torah scroll, of course you would say that the scroll is the tabula rasa, it's the negative, let's say, it's the emptiness, and the text is the positive, the somethingness.
Mm.
But of course, by calling us on black fire on white fire, it's making it very different, and it's putting it in question. So, for example, what if, rather like the painting of the vase, which you can see as the two people back to back, similar thing. You think rather than the ink being the positive, you could actually, it would be possible, presumably, to create a how do you put it, black marble, which you actually painted in white in order to reveal the same letters, an engraving.
Yeah. I mean, actually what you remind me of when you're speaking about sapphire. Well, it sounds like you're talking about the Ten Commandments, the tablets of the testimony, the Luchot, which was an engraving, right? It was like the letters were made from nothing, and the letters were the emptiness.
Yes.
Letters were the whole, and the substance was the sapphire, which is the sapphire, was the white fire, right? Yeah, so that's you're talking about an engraving. Yeah, interesting.
Yes, and it's interesting though to think just practically, so if people see like a picture of a page, they'll assume that the black is imprinted and that's the positive and the emptiness is the white. Yeah. But of course, we have to actually entertain like the possibility, you could actually show someone, they'd have to run their hand over it, that actually what's negative and what's positive. It could be an engraving, and actually the negative is the black and the white is actually imposed to create the letters. So it's a question of, one doesn't know what the emptiness is and what the form is.
Right, yeah. It's true. They give definitions to each other. So it's like you have to have both, and that's why it's kind of like why I find it interesting how it didn't occur to me, but Ratzu Vashov, I assumed that Ratzu came afterward. That's a speaking was a lower level than silence. Silence is a high level. Shov is high level returning. But then I realized, wait a minute, Ratzu is Ratzon, right? So therefore that's above, silence. So how does that work? So it's like, and I realized that Ratzu is actually Or Yashar, or it's a direct light, and that's like like we spoke about a few weeks ago. Direct, the metaphor is of what is it? Yeah. Direct light and reflected light.
So like in the Arizal's Kabbalah, it's interesting, of course, that his first, his starting point, if you will, is light. There was endless light.
Yeah.
For some people, like some philosophers, no doubt, probably many Jewish philosophers have said actually the start might be darkness. Yeah. Darkness was on the face of the deep. The start is darkness, and then a light is created in it. In fact, that's sort of what you get almost if you look at Bereshis. The dark is the start, and it's just very interesting to see, light and darkness are just as you say, you can't. It's genuine. Like people say, like you can't really separate them, but you can't. It's just like it's
Yeah, I mean, again, like in the Kabbalah, this is idea that there is it's uncertain what you're talking about. Like it looks like from one level, it looks like you're talking about this. It looks like running means running and returning means returning, but actually sometimes running means returning and returning means running. This is how actually Chassidut talks about it. It says that running actually is running to God, which is silence, and returning means returning to your ordinary life. So but it's always a question of perspective. And so you look, for example, you look in the Ramchal's Klach B'Tchei Chochmah is 138. To remember, think about that. Openings of wisdom. The translation is the translation in English. It says there that Or Yashar or Choser means that Malchut becomes Keter, and Yesod becomes Chochmah, and Or Yashar or Choser means that what we thought was Keter is actually Malchut, what we thought was Yesod was actually Chochmah, and it's an inversion, complete absolute inversion of it. So sometimes we don't know what we're looking at, and that's kind of why Keter is, that's why it's kind of within Keter, because Keter is like, well, we don't know what we're looking at. Sometimes it looks like wisdom, sometimes it looks like understanding, sometimes it's black, sometimes it's white. We just have to have emunah, and that's why in the if you look in the Idras Zutter, I think what the thing that penetrates into Atika Kadisha, which is Keter, is faith. That's the only way we can access an understanding of Keter is through faith. See the same thing in the Radzina, in the Hakdam Lebeit Yaakov, what's called Shara Movie, so the Chassidus. He says the same thing, that Keter, like we already know that we can't understand Chochmah because Chochmah understanding comes after Chochmah. But how do we even come to penetrate an understanding of Keter? It's like we don't. But what you can do is that Emunah gives you some kind of Da'at Elyon, higher knowing. You don't understand it. It's not even a wisdom. It's just a higher knowing. But it comes through faith. And maybe that's why it's going to the present moment, because the present moment requires an element of faith, just accepting whatever is there in the moment.
There's a surrender. They always say surrender to the present moment. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a completely different subject that you touched on was, where is the chair? Where is the chariot? Is it this? Is it that? It'd be very interesting to find a source with that kind of specific analogy, because loads of things. So I read a bit of Yehuda ibn Tibbon's commentary on Koheles.
Yeah.
It's very heavy going. Anyway, I looked up what he said on like Chavel Chavelim, right?
Yeah.
And he says that kind of nothing in the world is actually substantial. It's all interdependent, and he says it in very clear words. But I'd love to actually find something really on point that mentions this kind of idea of where's the chair? Is it here? Is it there? Where is the chariot? Is it here? Or is it there? I'd love to find something that really takes that metaphor and runs with it. It's a very useful one to explain the point. It's interesting because I've seen in a number of places, Judah ibn Tibon is just one example of where I've seen someone say, nothing you actually find is there's nothing really there, but it's constructed and it's codependent. But
I'd like to see that actually. If you can send that to me, that'd be really very, very good.
Yeah, I can send you the page. It's an amazing little line buried away in this very tough commentary. And but this idea is all over the place. But often they're just very matter of fact about it. When they say the world is nothing, the things are nothing. They just say it. They don't necessarily use such a poetic
explanation. Yeah, it's true. Interesting. Yeah. I just had another kind of reflection on the last one I read about that this idea of posture, of standing and sitting. So sitting, returning and standing. So the Hamed Davar is referring to Malchut, so the idea of establishing something, the completion of the Sof Davar, the completion of a thing. When we stand, when we use standing as a metaphor, we say, stand your ground, to stand up for your beliefs and that kind of thing. It's like standing is the sense of committing to something. It's a very active sense, right? So therefore, it's kind of like it's kind of like it's active. It's asiyah, right? There's a positivity there. So again, we have Hamed Davar Boryo means like establishing thing on its essence means thoroughly engage in whatever you're doing. Like you believe in something, you thoroughly engage in it. It's an active kind of almost an active stillness there. Whereas Asher Yetzira Mechana means sitting. Hityashvut in Hebrew means deliberation. It means it's uncertain. It's not full. It's not complete yet. There's still possibility.
Yeah. So shall I tell you something quite interesting on the points? So on the word, Omed or whatever. So I sent you an email, so if you looked at it, with a quote about the.
Oh yeah, I'm crushing on thing. Yeah, I actually replied to you just beforehand. Yeah, go on.
Oh right. Well, so anyway, this line which says, for the boards of the temple, you must use. You'll take acacia trees. Sorry, standing acacia trees. Okay, on the dim. And I was looking into some of the commentators on it, and it was really, really interesting because Omedim, they said, well, there were a couple of things. So, for one, there's one botanist who I think is also a rabbi, who's kind of said, well, they particularly in the desert, the acacia trees, they definitely don't stand up straight, because of the conditions. They're really gnarled and sort of crooked trees, these things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so he said they couldn't mean they were straight. That much was clear. And then I was looking into more sources on the point, because I was kind of using it as a thing that crooked. You still use things even if they're crooked or disformed or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, and there's one commentator, very interesting. He said when it says standing up straight, he says basically they had to be laid in the Mishkan, so that basically the wood was like pointing in the same direction as the direction it grew up from the floor. It couldn't point in the opposite. It couldn't point downwards rather than upwards.
Yeah.
Okay. And he says that it's about letting things kind of grow naturally as they are.
Yeah.
Not about particularly being straight or perfect, but just being just growing as it's meant to be.
Who says that?
I'll look it up when I get home.
That's really fascinating. Yeah, I mean
that's a relatively late one, I think.
That's a new one.
Relatively late commentator, I think. I think
it might be 20th century.
I can't remember, but I will look it up.
Head southeast.
Okay, fine. So that's interesting. First of all, there's a lot of other areas in halacha where we have to let things, use things in the manner of their growth. For example, I'm thinking of the one that pops into my mind is the Arba Minim. We hold them in the manner of that they grew, right? So you hold the base of the base and the bases of the base and the tops of the top, right? With Halasim, Aravot, and Lulav. We hold them in that manner, and that's how we use them. So that's interesting. But if you look at how my translation of Hamed Davar Boryo, establish every word by its nature. So we go. It's the same with what you just said about that. We look at the way things are naturally, and then establish them as they are. So it's like, what is a chair? Well, we have to define. We define what a chair is, and then we know what a chair is because we've defined it in this particular way. For example, what is a tree? When is a tree not a tree? When it's a bush, or when it's something else. Is a banana tree a tree, but it dies off every year? So is it actually a tree or not? Not every year. I mean, I think a banana plant dies once it produces fruit. But
was quite interesting because I was reading a midrash the other day. I think it was Esther Rubber, and it was really quite interesting. There was this line which was said kind of like, something was placed on the north side. It might have been placed on the south side, temple or whatever. And they said, oh yeah, and it's fine, north side or south side, it doesn't make a difference. But he says, like, once it's placed on the north side, then forever,
right onto London Road,
you put it on the north side. Which of course is, I think, as much as anything, a sort of description of, like halacha. It could have been decided the other way, but now it's been decided this way. We'll do it that way. But it's the same.
Your sat nav came in, so I didn't hear what you said. If something grows on the north side, you plant it on the north side. If it's
no. So like it was saying, like I think it was something in the temple. Like they said, it could have been placed on the south side or the north side. Wouldn't have made a difference. Right. And the rabbi replies, well, yeah, but now it's been placed on the north side. It's forever has to be on the north side.
Right.
So as anything, it's a thing like probably about halacha and the fact that it's the convention stands. It could have been otherwise, but it's the exact same thing with the linguistic conventions. Of course, we could have called a chair anything, and we could have put the boundary between a chair and a chaise longue anywhere. But once it stands, then it's a kind of Wittgensteinian thing, isn't it? Like once that's the convention, you work within the convention.
Well, we work within until that boundary changes, also, because we could because the words change their meanings as well. So again within the couple, I think there's an essential word for every object has an essential word for it that doesn't change. But again, I think the way language develops is that as it changes. So chair may have meant something different.
It's interesting though, because of course. In Bereshis, who gives the name to everything? Names to everything. It's not Hashem.
Yeah,
it's man.
It's man. That's true. Yeah,
it's interesting.
Very interesting. Okay, good. I mean, I think we've we go back onto that thing. I think we've explained it as thoroughly as kind of is necessary for the time being. There's probably more to say there, but I'm not sure how fruitful it will be to go into that. I still feel like there's Hamid Avar Boreal. There's more to say there.
Rabbi, can I ask you a question before we leave today?
Go ahead.
How do I research more? Since I always love sapphires. How do I research more about what the first commandments look like with the sapphire?
You mean the stone itself? I'll tell you where the person to speak with. That'll be Roland, because Roland does.
Really, Roland?
Okay. He's done all the research because he's got a book coming out and it's all about sapphires. So he'll be able to give you all of his resources for that. And I don't know if I could think of a better source.
How do you like that, Roland? How do you like that, Roland?
Funny enough, though, actually, there's loads out there on Sapphire. The references to the first tablets of the commandments, the ones Moses originally brought down, was supposedly made of sapphire. But the references actually, the reference I have to that are rather limited. Actually, it's there's lots of things about sapphire research, but it's interesting. It's a kind of favourite stone, but they also like diamonds in the tradition. Diamonds are very popular. Emeralds, gold, silver. So
But didn't you find that the second tablets were also made from sapphire, Roland?
I didn't find that source.
You know what the mine in Moshe's tent is that not from there, right?
Oh right. So
your destination is on the left.
Yeah, but so there's the thing about Moses found a sapphire mine in his tent. But I'm not actually sure if that was directly connected. At least it wasn't in that midrash. It wasn't explicitly connected with the Ten Commandments.
It wasn't connected to it.
No, not explicitly anyway.
Would it not be connected to the second tablets though? Because the original tablets were given by God to Moshe, and the second tablets, God says, "Go and make the tablets."
Oh, he does. That is true. I'll have to look it up again. The first set were definitely sapphire.
Yeah.
The second set, I thought the whole point was they had to be ordinary stone because that's all we merited.
That's what I thought. That's what it was. It's from my research. That's what I've always discovered.
Yeah,
I looked back over that.
the Sapphire mine and Moshe's tent. I think it just, that kind of raises a doubt in my mind whether how that was. Anyway, look, I haven't done the research myself either, so this is Tarikh Yun for the next time possibly.
I've actually got to get out now because I'm at my destination.
Great. I think we're going to finish up now. Unless there's more questions, we've had a good kind of thing go. Next time we'll start with meditation. We'll move on to mishnah. What was it, 6 or 5, whichever one it was.
Well, no, thank you very much. And
but thank you. I'm gonna review what we have today. I'm gonna go over the first few missions and Sefer Yetzira this week.
Great. We'll have a look at the first few talks as well that we've done on this.
I'm away. I think I'm coming back on the 28th.
So I'm also going to be away until I'm here next week. So we can do a session next week. I don't know if Kenny if you're available. Or we can break for the winter.
I'm available next week if you need.
Okay, fine. Yeah. So we can do it, and then probably from then I'm going to be breaking it for a while. So.
Yeah, but funny enough, I might actually still be able to come because, of course, it's Zoom, of course, everything these days. So even though I'm abroad, I might be able to come.
Okay, great. Well, let's keep in touch then. Good. Okay, so have a good weekend. I'm going to stop the recording.